Hey everyone, today is the last episode about the 3 steps of data work. Let's just recap the first step and the second step. In the first step, we talk about how to get data. For example, if we open the data tab and the query and the connections, we connect the data from the raw source and rename it as a raw so we can have a look of the table structure. And the step 2 is based on that raw table, we have developed connections. We merge table together to expand the horizon of the information to describe more about a particular order line item by introducing, for example, the customer information and also product information. So we did 2 TDA layers. It's like SQL views. So we join multiple tables and make them into one big fat ultra wide table and have them display in the background. So I'm gonna do a little cleanup since this all piled up. I'm just gonna drop them into a new group. So for this one, we can just call it raw. And once it's done, this will be included in the other. So the other part, I'm gonna create a new group. The new group be the TDA. Okay, now we have done. So any new query in the background will be in the other queries folder. For the one that we have ingested and transformed, this part is the ingested, this part is transformed. While we are ingesting the data, we are also cleansing the data in the meantime. So it happened in the same folder, but in this TDA folder is based on the clean data, we join multiple tables. So that's why we call it TDA layer. So today we're going to base on this TDA layer to develop some visual impression for your stakeholders so they can understand more about underlying information. But most importantly, once we set up this workflow, it's going to be for all to jump back this report to have a look of what is going on with the business. Okay, before we dive into the topic, I want to take a look of the connection. So first we're going to the edit. In edit, we're opening the Power Query edit. Like I mentioned before, Power Query is a data cleansing and transformation tool. It helps you get the data and transform them, clean them in a way that you can consume later on. If we go into the view section, there's a query dependencies. If you ever heard lineage concept, is telling you all the data point from the source to the transform layer and also at the final stage. For example, if we change the layout to left to right layout, you can see our data source is a big query, and for that part, there are several raw table ingested, which is the second layer. And then the third layer is the TDA layer. You can see they have been lined up very beautifully. If we just select one of the layer, it will tell us the pathway that has been through. For example, for this TDA layer, we call it a TDA table. It will be part of this 2 raw customer and raw order, and they are coming from the same data warehouse, which is Google BigQuery. For this TDA order 4 is actually coming from 4 tables. They are fully utilized and coming from the BigQuery. So by this, you have a clear picture about what is going on in the backend. With project going on and off, and you will get yourself more familiar with this kind of data flow, this is pretty important for you to have something in mind. That's why we set up this particular order, so you know that there's a dependency between the TDA layer and also your raw table layer. If you got any confusion later on, just open this query dependencies. I don't like this. When I think about data flow, is from left to the right hand side, so you have a clear picture about what is going on. Since this data set is quite small, we won't spend much time on that. So this is just a sidetrack, and I'm going to close this off. I'm not going to use the TDA order because we know that this only uses 2 tables. That's why it has only this limited amount of columns. For this TDA order 4, all tables utilized. I'm going to use this as a base, so I can build up visuals. To build up visual, there's a certain layer. So we know that when we're talking about visual, you can go into the insert. That's a chart that we're talking about. But also visual include the pivot table. Pivot table is a traditional way to present your data by categorical data and also numbers. For a general user or even top user, they don't care about a particular number. What they care about is a trend, is a big picture, is top section of your business. For example, top product, top customer, top order amount, sort of things. So we need to jump around from the format of a pivot table with all the labels and just numbers and transform it into a visual, vivid thing. So that's what we call dashboard. In order to do that, we need to set up another layer. Once we have this TDA layer, we're going to utilize this TDA order for, we call it a table. We're going to use this to create a pivot table. Based on the pivot table, we're going to develop pivot chart. There's a connection between your pivot table and pivot chart. So while we are changing the pivot table, the pivot chart will automatically change. So that's our goal. So in order to do that, first we need to load this table back into this Excel as the form of a pivot table, right? You can have a pivot chart. We can do that, but let's just do the dummy way. We'll create a pivot table. Based on the pivot table, we're going to create a pivot chart, okay? Let's just choose this area. Okay, just wait for a second until it finishes loading. Okay, this has been dumped in. I haven't developed anything in this part, but first, let's just look at something pretty obvious. We're going to have a simple pivot table like order quantity by product. What we're going to do is we're going to do order quantity, and then we're going to go into the SKU names. So this is the order quantity by product. If we sort this by the descending order, so like this way. And now I'm going to say, since I'm not interested in any other than top 5, so by going to here, I can select the, okay, I don't think you guys can see the top, that's fine. Okay, but over the top, I can choose the value field and top 10. I'm going to adjust this to top 5 is by some quantity. Click OK. So that's the first pivot table we have. In this tab, I want to just focus on the pivot. So I'm going to just only focus on the product pivot. So by product pivot, I can look at a order quantity by product. So that's going to be the order. For this particular visual, I can give it a name. So it's going to be pivot. Okay. Once I have this name, I can have this, hold your control, we drag this to here. What will happen is we're going to have another top 5 product. But this time we're going to look at the order value. If you look at the structure of the table, we only have the quantity and the unit price. There's no order value. You can go into the query section and redevelop additional column in the TDA layer to the last and use this times that. Or you can go into this pivot table. We go into the pivot field. In this way, we can go into analyze and say we're going to do a calculate field. In the calculate field, we can say order total. In that order total, I'm going to use the quantity times the unit price. Click add, close that. Now you have this order total. Now this time, I have this order total. I'm going to remove the sum quantity and do the same thing for the value field and top 5. This time is by the order total. Okay, let's change that order total to a different name because this name I feel like is not that good. So we're going to change this to sales value, order value. Okay, we're going to say click OK. I'm going to just leave this over here. I think we can maybe go into this section, calculate field. We're going to the order total. I'm going to delete that. Okay, so that's the order value. And then we have this order value here. We're going to the section top 10, step 10 with to top 5. Okay. Now I have this too, and do the same thing because we know the name of this is pivot that. We're gonna copy that, go into this pivot, rename that. This time is not by product, not by order quantity, instead of by order value. Okay, click OK. So now we have pivot product of 2 things to describe that. That's totally good. And based on that, we can reproduce another one. This one, we're going to say customer. For the customer part, I don't need part. In customer, I'm only interested in the order value by top 5 customer. Same thing. So we're going to use the email address as the customer identification. This time, we're going to look at the order value as well. And we remove some of the quantity and we sort this by the descending order. In that way, I can show the value only for top 10 or top 5. So that's the pivot customer. So I've done this part. Now we come to our last pivot section, which in this section, let's remove that. Let's just duplicate that once more. So pivot section, this one, we're going to say time series. In time series, just time related information about the performance of the company. For example, for this part, let's go back to the pivot customer. For the pivot customer, you also need to make sure the name has that correct. So it's going to be the order value by customer. Okay. Now going to the time series. In the time series, we can have a look of the order date. So let's just remove this email and we're going to look at the order date. So by order date, my order value has been in such a way. And what if we introduce the product into product, for example, SKU name over the column. And now we have the, what do we call this table will be a different name. So we're going to say pivot is order value by days and by product. So that's the new name of this part. And for the last part of the time series, what I need is another one. So we can just copy this whole section, go into this part. This time we're going to look at different things. Instead of looking at a product, we're going to have a look of the order quantity, but also we're going to look at order value, which is over here. So in this way, we can sort that to, for example, by the sales order value, we sort by this order. In that way, we can have should be sorted by this kind of hierarchy by the date. So this is going to be this pivot table. We're going to call it pivot. Pivot going to be order quantity value by days. Okay, let's recheck the name of this part. This is pivot order value by days and product. Okay, that's fine. So now we have done our organization about pivot. So they will be the back support of our pivot chart. But first I need to fix some, say the format of this one. So for this one, we need to go into the value setting, number formatting, because we know this is a currency and we don't need this decimal. And we click OK, close that. Same thing for this order value. We're going to do the same trick about the currency settings, remove that, have that. Okay, time series, same thing. We're going to do the value setting and number formatting, go into the custom and remove that. Okay, for this part, go into the canvas setting. Okay, we have done our foundation about that. Now let's look at how to develop a pivot chart on that. Easy. For this chart, as I know that I can have a tools over here, pivot chart. So let's just close this part, reselect this, go into here, pivot chart. This pivot chart is pretty straightforward because we want to display this view about the pivot chart in the form of, for example, a pie chart will be probably much enough to represent the information about the top 5. So in that way, we can just click this one and go into that. In this, there's a little something that we need to, for example, adjust it. First thing is about if we double click this part, it will open this section. In this section, this is two things for me. So I'm going to increase not angle, not exposure, but I'm going to decrease this whole size to make it a little bulkier, and that's suit my need. And since we're looking at top 5, so that's the top 5. If you want to change that little design quickly, they have several options for you. For me, I like to have the percentage over the overlay on the chart, so I like this way. So in that way, we can have, let's just say, cut. Then you just need to drag this to the bottom. If you see that there's a cut option for you, you just cut that. Once you cut that, we can develop a new thing. Let's just call this, say, overview. Then we paste that. So this is our first chart about something. It's based on this one. We know that. And for this chart, we can give it the name design in format. So this will be the pivot. Let's just say this is product 1, right? In that way, we know this is the product 1. And based on this, I can have another, for example, the pie chart. So if we go into the analyze pivot chart, going to do the same thing, click that, and then we can cut this over, paste over here. So once I paste, I can reduce that to the same level. For example, this one, I know that if I double click this, it's going to be 50%. So I want to do the same trick about this part. So double click, just click. It's going to be 50%. Okay, 50%. And the quick view that we need to have the, for example, this one we're going to call it product 2, and then we're gonna have the design section. We use this part. Okay, let's just display this over this section, and this is gonna be over here. Okay, so it looks like all good, and this a little bit. Okay, so that's the 2 pie chart that we have. So the top 5 product by both sales quantity and sales order value. And since we have finished this part, we're gonna have a pivot table. We're gonna have a pivot chart for this part. But this part, I don't want anything fancy, so I'm going to just cut this part. I'm just copy this part and go into this section. For this part, I'm going to just rename this as like say pivot. Let's just say customer. We know that it's coming from that page. We can this larger. Okay. Now we have done the pivot chart for a product, pivot chart or pivot table for the customer. Now we come to time series. So in the time series, we have 2 pivot table. One is your pivot table by days looking at different products. So for this one, we can actually use a stack table. So we can use this, go go into the stack section. We just use stacked column, click OK. Once we have this, we cut this table going to the top section over here. We kind of align them together. Okay, by looking at these things, you can have a look up, for example, by different days, what is the component proportion about different mix of product. For example, on this day, our smartwatch make a big sales and happen on the 9th of March. And in that way, you can do something over that, right? So that's the one chart that we have. We can also have another one appear to the side, for example. Okay. So this is one of the chart. We can have another one for the time series, for example, this part. For this part, the best presentation is a combo chart. In that way, we can go into the chart, can directly go into the combo. In the combo, how should we do that? We need to have set up a second axis. For example, in this way, I think we can have some quantity as the bar chart, which is the second one, and the line chart is representing the order value by the day. Very quick. Okay, with that, we can just click OK. Once we have that, cut over here, paste. Okay, now it's coming to our most interesting part. The reason is that I want something that can be controlled and control all the visuals that in one go. So how should we do that? Because we know that based on a particular pivot table, you can actually go into insert section. You have this kind of filters. For example, if I insert a filter about, for this particular case, I'm going to insert, for example, I can have the school name. If I take one of the school name, you can see this has been changed because I'm picking the blender, but this one is not. The reason is being that for this slicer, there's a setting about report connections. Remember all the rename that we have done, you may think is time consuming in the beginning, but later on you will appreciate that time because there's a very clear picture of what I have done because each of the pivot table I have given a dedicated name that representing what it's doing for that. So simple rule is that if your source is just going to be one, because all of our pivot table is developed based on one TDA transformation in the Power Query, so I can just simply tick all of them. I click OK. Now if I choose one of that, it will change not only for this two pivot table, but also for this one, but also for the time series. Can see that? So that's the thing I want. Once I have this, I can just going to cut this and I'm going to paste over here. So that's the thing I want. Once I have this is one thing. I also want something that can have the customer ready. So I go into the customer section. I go into the insert slash. This time I'm going to look at a customer email address. I do the same trick. You can also go into the right click. There's something say report connections. Do the same trick. I'm going to just take all of them and then I cut that. Paste over here. Okay, now come to the interesting part. How do you pick a date? A date has a dedicated thing. If we go into here, go into the insert, there's actually a timeline. So it will automatically sense a date or time column. So you can pick that as a timeline and then I can cut, go into here. Remember, I haven't set up the report connection. Go into here, report connections, pick all of the pivot table that I have picked, click OK. Okay, so it looks like we have done, but it's a little bit touch we need to done because the format is so ugly and so hard to read. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to fix those kind of filter things. For example, this one will be, if you go into Control All, it will select all of them. So for this part, we can check up the alignment, can take this. In that way, you will have easier alignment for your, you can see it's automatically sense the boundary of the cell. And in that way, you can align them easily. For example, for the date, I normally put this over the top. Because if I down to days, if I go into back to that, I know everything happened in the March of 2023. So I'm going to anchor this back to 2023 March. Okay. So if I go into March day 1, okay, that's a dot. So first I'm going to do a little bit check. You can see once I select a different period, all my visuals, including this pivot table, has been changed. So that's the thing I want. Okay. Second, we need to make a little bit change about this kind of visuals. For example, we know that this is going to be take a larger place to play. So we normally have them have a bigger place. That way I can expand this to a longer side. Okay. Once I have this, I have this say pie chart over this corner and it line up in such a fashion, right? And then I can have this over here. And now we have this second visual. Okay. move this over here. This one, we can do the same trick. Just align this to the bottom. With the snipping tool, it's much easier for you to align them, because without that, you hardly align everything into one line. So that's the trick that I have. Okay. Also, you need to consider if it can fit into one page. For example, this page probably is a little bit narrower, so I can make this narrower, and I park this to this section, and I make this a little bit up. That way I can see everything. Okay, it looks like I can make this a little bit shorter, but there's a limitation that I can do. Okay, it's over here. I think the best I can do is over here. Okay, that's good enough. I can make this even shorter. This one can move up. Now I can make this up. Okay, looks like okay. Pack this up. I'll pack this up as well. Go to right hand side and do a little bit touch up. Okay. Once I've done these skews, I can make this up. So I know the skew gonna have a lot of text content. I can make this even as a 2 rows. Include that. I can make this wider and make it up. For the email address, we know it's a customer base, right? So we can have this as a slicer over here. At the top, we match that alignment. For this, we know this is a pivot table. We're gonna move this over this place to have it nicely displayed. Okay. Once we have this done, let's just re-look at our report. Seems like this is a little bit too small, but that's fine. We can just move this to a bit to make this one make it bigger. And it's just a matter of, like, say, preference. For example, if you don't like this is probably a little bit too small, right? So we can, let's just make this bigger. I think doesn't matter. Okay. Okay. So that's pretty much that we have over here. So if I make this a little bit smaller on this whole page, you can have a sense about the information. One aesthetic thing that I normally want to address is by looking at, from, for example, the boundary about that. You can go into the view to untick these grid lines. That way it's a blank canvas, right? You can make this shorter as that. This one part to here. Now come to this, you can actually decide if you have a border or not, because right now it's automatic. You can have a touch, say what is going on with this. With this setting, it's more intuitive. For example, if I pick a date, all my visuals will change, even with this pivot table. And then I further pick that, everything has been changed. So that's something that you can develop simply by using Excel. The powerful side about Excel is that simplicity and the transparency about the whole process. By setting up this kind of pivot table and pivot chart using slicer to control them all, that's a common technique happen in the BI team. If Excel is the only tools that you have, from that scratch to this take a lot of effort, but once you have set it down, the workflow is pretty easy to maintain. Change your TDA layer to have more column included. So let's wrap it up. We have gone through some important topic about data flow. By setting up proper data flow from the step 1, step 2, and then come to the step 3, we are able to develop a dynamic dashboard which link to our data source. And most importantly, end of the video over here, you have a refresh button. Once you refresh, we go into the data connection view. You don't see what happened. That TDA layer will be refreshed. Everything will have the newly refreshed data once the refresh has been done. So there's no other maintenance you need to work on. And this property setting for refresh can be set up whenever you open the file. So it's take just a little while for you to have everything done nicely in this dashboard. So that's pretty much for today. And if you're interested in data transformation in Excel, just leave a comment below and have a subscription on my channel. We'll release more information about how to do this data work, the 3 steps: input, processing, output, using other tools, for example, SQL or the data warehouse BigQuery in the future. Today, it's just a simple conclusion about the data work in Excel. And see you guys in the next one.